by talking with them, what are the fundamental ideas they're operating on. Everybody is. Everybody is a philosopher. Everybody has metaphysics, although they may not know what it is, so they've never examined it. But by this method you bring it out, and you demolish it. And this suddenly, what seemed like a very nice intellectual discussion, turns into sheer murder. People get really anxious. They develop all the trembles and the symptoms of extreme anxiety. And so they finally say to the guru, the teacher, well, heaven's sakes, what do you believe in?
Okay, I'm going to do a brief reading here. This is from C.G. Jung, Psychological Reflections by Ilan Jacoby. This is called The World of Values. A gift develops in inverse ratio to the maturation of the personality as a whole, and often one has the impression that a creative personality grows at the expense of the human being. Sometimes, indeed, there is such a discrepancy between the genius and his human qualities that one has to ask oneself whether a little less talent might not have been better. What, after all, is great talent beside moral inferiority? There are not a few gifted persons whose usefulness is paralyzed, not to say perverted, by their human shortcomings. A gift is not an absolute value, or rather, it is such a value only when the rest of the personality keeps pace with it. Nature, as we know, is not so lavish with her boons that she joins to a high intelligence the gifts of the heart also. As a rule, where one is present, the other is missing, and where one capacity is present in perfection, it is generally at the cost of all the others. The best can be produced only by the best, and man by his conscientiousness and devotion. Cultural products can therefore easily stand for the psychological conditions of their production, that is, for those human virtues which alone make man capable of civilization. The genius will come through despite everything, for there is something absolute and indomitable in his nature. The so-called misunderstood genius is rather a doubtful phenomenon. Generally, he turns out to be a good-for-nothing who is forever seeking a soothing explanation of himself. Talent, on the other hand, can either be hampered, crippled and perverted, or fostered, developed, and improved. The genius is as rare a bird as the phoenix, an apparition, not to be counted on consciously or unconsciously. Genius is something that by God's grace is there from the start in full strength. But talent is a statistical regularity, and does not always have a dynamism to match. To rush ahead is to invite blows, and if you don't get them from the teacher, you will get them from fate, and generally from both. The gifted child will do well to accustom himself early to the fact that any excellence puts him in an exceptional position, and exposes him to a great many risks, the chief of which is an exaggerated self-confidence. Against this, the only protection is humility and obedience, and even these do not always work. The artist's relative lack of adaptation turns out to his advantage. It enables him to follow his own yearnings far from the beaten path, and to discover what it is that would meet the unconscious needs of his age. Thus, just as the one-sidedness of the individual's conscious attitude is corrected by reactions from the unconscious, so art represents a process of self-regulation in the life of nations and epochs. To be normal is the ideal aim for the unsuccessful, for all those who are still below the general level of adaptation. But for people of more than average ability, people who never found it difficult to gain successes and to accomplish their share of the world's work, for them the moral compulsion to be nothing but normal signifies the bed of Procrustes, deadly and insupportable boredom, a hell of sterility and hopelessness. The greatness of historical personalities has never lain in their abject submission to convention, but, on the contrary, in their deliverance from convention. They towered up like mountain peaks above the mass that still clung to its collective fears, its beliefs, laws, and systems, and boldly chose their own way. To the man in the street, it has always seemed miraculous that anyone should turn aside from the beaten track with its known destinations and strike out on the steep and narrow path leading into the unknown. Hence, it was always believed that such a man, if not actually crazy, was possessed by a demon or a god. For the miracle of a man being able to act otherwise than as humanity has always acted could only be explained by the gift of demonic power or divine spirit. Only the mystics bring creativity into religion. Creative life always stands outside convention. That is why, when the mere routine of life predominates in the form of convention and tradition, there is bound to be a destructive outbreak of creative energy. This outbreak is a catastrophe only when it is a mass phenomenon, but never in the individual who consciously submits to these higher powers and serves them with all his strength. Every creative person is a duality or a synthesis of contradictory qualities. On the one side, he is a human being with a personal life, while on the other, he is an impersonal, creative process. As a human being, he may be sound or morbid, and his personal psychology can and should be explained in personal terms, but he can be understood as an artist only in terms of his creative achievement. The distortion of beauty and meaning by grotesque objectivity or equally grotesque reality is, in the insane, a consequence of the destruction of the personality. In the artist, it has a creative purpose. Far from his work being an expression of the destruction of his personality, the modern artist finds the unity of his artistic personality in destructiveness. What the artist and the insane have in common is what the artist and the insane have in common is common also to every human being, a restless creative fantasy which is constantly engaged in smoothing away the hard edges of reality. Anyone who observes himself carefully and unsparingly will know that there is something within him which would gladly hide and cover up all that is difficult and questionable in life in order to smooth a path for itself. Insanity gives it a free hand, and once it has gained the ascendancy, reality is veiled. More quickly or less, it becomes a distant dream, but the dream becomes a reality which holds the patient enchained wholly or in part, often for the rest of his life. We healthy people who stand with both feet in reality see only the ruin of the patient in this world, but not the richness of that side of the psyche which is turned away from us. If the meaning of a poetic work can be exhausted through the application of a theory of neurosis, then it was nothing but a pathological product in the first place, to which I would never concede the dignity of a work of art. Today, it is true, our taste has become so uncertain that often we no longer know whether a thing is art or a disease. A person must pay dearly for the divine gift of creative fire. It is as though each of us was born with a limited store of energy. In the artist, the strongest force is his makeup, that is, his creativeness. Will seize and all but monopolize this energy, leaving so little over that nothing of value can come of it. The creative impulse can drain him of his humanity to such a degree that the personal ego can exist only on a primitive or inferior level, and is driven to develop all sorts of defects, ruthlessness, selfishness, autoeroticism, vanity, and other infantile traits. These inferiorities are the only means by which it can maintain its vitality and prevent itself from being wholly depleted. The genius, too, has to bear the brunt of an outsized psychic complex if he can cope with it. He does so with joy. If he can't, he must painfully perform the symptomatic actions which his gift lays upon him. He writes, paints, and composes what he suffers. Great gifts are the fairest, and often the most dangerous, fruits on the tree of humanity. They hang on the weakest branches, which break easily. Nothing is so jealous as a truth. Problems of self-realization. The investigation of truth must begin fresh with each case, for each case is individual and not derivable from any preconceived formula. Each individual is a new experiment of life in her ever-changing moods and an attempt at a new solution or new adaptation. No doubt it is a great nuisance that mankind is not uniform, but compounded of individuals whose psychic structure spreads them over a span of at least 10,000 years. Hence, there is absolutely no truth that does not spell salvation to one person and damnation to another. All universalisms get stuck in this terrible dilemma. In our delusion-ridden world, truth is so precious that nobody wants to let it slip merely for the sake of a few so-called exceptions which refuse to toe the line, and whoever doubts this truth is invariably looked on as a faithless reprobate, so that a note of fanaticism and intolerance everywhere creeps into the discussion. And yet each of us can carry the torch of knowledge but a part of the way until another takes it from him. If only we could understand all this impersonally, could understand that we are not the personal creators of our truths, but only their exponents, mere mouthpieces of the day's psychic needs, then much venom and bitterness might be spared, and we should be able to perceive the profound and superpersonal continuity of the human mind. Conviction easily turns into self-defense and is seduced into rigidity, and this is inimical to life. The test of a firm conviction is its elasticity and flexibility. Like every other exalted truth, it thrives best on the admission of its errors. Okay, I'm going to take a reading break and then I'm going to read two other little books. Here we go.
And so they finally say to the guru, the teacher, well, heaven's sakes, what do you believe in? He says, I'm not proposing anything. I didn't set anything up. Well, how do you navigate? How do you exist? This is what's the problem. Because you see, what we're moving from, as I suggested a moment ago, we're moving from a state of affairs where we're accustomed to navigation on land to a state of affairs where we're in the water. And this is very critical for today because the impact of modern science on Western culture has been very similar to this. In Christianity, we sing hymns like How Firm a Foundation and Rock of Ages, Ein fester Burg, a mighty fortress is our God. We've something to stand on. The church's one foundation is Jesus Christ her Lord, It is this firm thing. All right, suddenly all that disappears or becomes implausible. And we find ourselves swimming or sinking. Now, when you find that you're living in the midst of the universe of relativity, well, there's nothing you can hold on to. You've got to learn how to swim. And to swim, you've got to relax and stop grabbing. So this is what Buddhism does. When it says it's the art of let go, non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean that you lose your appetite.
Annoyingly.
It means simply that you stop grabbing. You get rid of stickiness. Stickiness in the sense that, for example, when a wheel has a too tight and it sticks. You want to loosen it up a bit. You don't want it too loose. You don't want it floppy. Like a lot of people, when you tell them to relax, they become like a limp rag. It's not relaxing. Relaxing is having still tone.
He definitely knows white trash.
It's middle way.
He definitely knows white trash.
So this is entirely what Buddhism is about. It's about learning. For example, if I may put it in a vivid way, when you were born, you were kicked off a precipice. And there's nothing that can stop you falling.
He's back.
And although there are a lot of rocks falling with you, with trees growing on them and all sorts of things like that, you can cling to one of those rocks, if you like, as it goes down with you for safety. But it's not safe. Nothing is safe. Everything is falling apart. Everything is in a state of change. And there's no way of stopping it. And when you are really resigned to that, when you really accept that, then there's nothing left to be afraid of. And when there's nothing left to be afraid of, and you've given everything up, and you know that even, a lot of people in religion cling to suffering because they know they are right as long as they hurt. Oh, I bless the good Lord for my boils, for my mental and bodily pains. For without them my faith all congeals, and I'm doomed to hell's ne'er-ending flames. A lot of people who know that they're right so long as they suffer. But that's an illusion too. Even suffering offers no security. Even suicide offers no security in Buddhism, you see. There is no security at all. You simply have to face this fact that everything is in flux and go
That's
love
with
story,
man.
And so,
loves to talk.
the question then is simply how to convince people of this, if anybody wants to be convinced. It's not the sort of thing you shove down people's throats. You don't convert them to this. Because if they don't want to be converted, they won't let go.
Of course.
So, Buddhism therefore involves a very special relationship between the questioner and the person to whom the question is addressed, the pupil and the teacher.
Because a certain filter
and now then, Buddhism came to China as early as 60 AD, but didn't at that time make a very great impression.
Oh, he happened to be
It was not until about the year 400 that a very great Sanskrit scholar by the name of Kumarajiva came and started teaching Chinese scholars Sanskrit. And they worked with him to translate Sanskrit into Chinese. And they translated
let him talk about
Buddhist scriptures. They didn't, of course, do them all at that time, because the Buddhist scriptures occupy about as much space as the Encyclopedia Britannica. In fact, a little more. The Indians are great talkers. Well, anyway, they found that when they translate this into Chinese, they had to find equivalent Chinese words for the Sanskrit ideas, and they found these from the Taoist philosophy. Well, slowly then, Indian attitudes began to be modified by Chinese attitudes because the Chinese read into these translations Taoist meanings. So things got a little altered. Now here came the alteration that is crucial. First of all, in Indian Buddhism, there's very little humor. But Chinese life is full of humor. The greatest philosopher of China, Zhuangzi, is the only philosopher who is, I think, in the whole world, who is profoundly humorous. There's a book in the Modern Library, published by Random House, called The Wisdom of Lao Tzu. And this is translated by Lin Yutang. And he includes, along with the translation of Lao Tzu, huge sections of Chuang-Tzu. And this is absolutely fascinating because of the humor of it. Indian Buddhism had very little humor. Some, yes, but very little. Next, it was all tied up with celibacy, which to the Chinese was absolutely incomprehensible. Because Chinese civilization is rigged around the family to a far greater extent than ours is, which is saying something. And they just couldn't see any point or any wisdom in celibacy. When Buddhism came to China, it still retained a certain element of celibacy, but for different reasons than Hindu. The Chinese way of celibacy is not that sex is naughty, but it's terribly convenient not to have a wife. In other words, the ideal of the uninvolved life has a certain appeal. But they could never get through into their heads the notion that sexual desire was bad, which has always played a fairly strong role in Hindu thinking. Not in the same way as it has in the West. The Hindus don't have a guilt take on it. But they think that it dissipates your spiritual energies. And you see, in yoga, they envisage the idea that at the base of the spine, there is what is called the kundalini, the serpent power, or the force of psychic energy. And so long as it remains at the base of the spine, this force is dissipated in sexuality. Now, yoga is to suck this thing up the spine and get it into the head. And so then you withdraw from the manifestation of this energy, or the dissipation of it, in sexuality, and it's put on a higher level. Only which end is up. You can do it the other way too. They have what's called the right-hand way of doing it and the left-hand way of doing it. I'm not going to go into that now. But the Chinese didn't see it that way. They couldn't see that it was a dissipation of energy. So what they wanted to aim at was a way of living Buddhism and being awake, but at the same time remaining active in the ordinary life of the world. It's what's called, in their phraseology, being king on the outside and a sage on the inside. It has been well said that Buddhism is Hinduism stripped for export. See, Hinduism is a way of life that goes far, far beyond what we in the West call religion. It involves cookery, everyday family life, house building, just everything. It's the whole Hindu way of life. And so you can't export it, just as you can't export Shinto from Japan. It belongs to the soil and the culture. But there are essential elements in it that can be transmitted outside the culture of India. Managing practical affairs, completely involved in whatever life is, but at the same time, inwardly living on top of the mountain,
red tie.
being cloud-hidden, whereabouts unknown. So, Chinese Zen is the preeminent expression of this, because it is the mixture of Indian Buddhism and Chinese Taoism, plus a certain Confucian practicality. Zen developed out of the work of Kumarajiva. Came into China, as I said, 400, or a little before. And then you suddenly get into a kind of vertigo, dizziness, that you feel suddenly that you're no longer standing on the firm ground, but that the universe has suddenly turned into water, or worse, air, or worse still, empty space. There's nothing to hold on to. Now you see, often when one discusses religion with people, they say, well, I need a religion because I need something to hold on to. Well, that's the way not to use a religion. Because if you use religion as something to hold on to, your religion is an expression of unfaith. Faith is where you let go, not where you hold on. When the cat falls off the tree, the cat relaxes, you see. And so the cat lands with a soft thud and doesn't get hurt because the cat has faith. But if the cat in midair were suddenly to grab itself with all 4 feet and tighten up, see, it'd be hurt. And that's what people do when they say, Rock of Ages cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. They want something to hold on to, see. And that is unfaith. So the method of Buddhism, it's called the Dharma, doesn't mean the law, it means the method. The method is to knock the stuffing out of you, to take away everything to which you cling, to cleanse you completely of all beliefs, all ideas, all concepts of what life is about,
I need your.
so that you are completely let go. Doesn't, as it were, look over your shoulder and wander off to something else.
I need your creative support.
Somebody who, first of all, he's completely here, and he's so much here that you can't phase him. Now, this idea of phasing is crucial in Zen. You see, I referred a moment ago to attachment, that Buddhism is living free from attachments. And I made the point that this is not abandoning a sense of a good appetite for dinner, but it's stopping sticking. In psychological jargon, you don't block. A mind of no hesitation, it's sometimes called. In Chinese, the phrase mo zhi chu is used, of going straight ahead. So supposing somebody walks up to you on the street and says, "Are you saved?" Now, most of us who are intelligent people feel embarrassed by such a question. You know, what's this wretched Salvation Army person or Jehovah's Witness doing asking me whether I'm saved or not? And we're all a little bit, you know, what do you do with a nut like that? So, but as in Zen, this is a perfect moment to respond, see? To the most embarrassing question, are you saved? But Zen comes back in a very funny way. In Zen, one doesn't give philosophical answers to a question like that. You give practical answers. I had a boiled egg this morning. Because whenever you are asked about matters sacred, theoretical and philosophical, you answer in terms of things earthy and practical. But then on the other hand, when you are asked about things earthy and practical, you answer in terms of things religious and philosophical. Is dinner ready? You know? Who's asking this question? Who are you? So, this is then the flavor of Zen. Is, you know, Bodhidharma is supposed to have meditated so long that his legs fell off. And he's usually drawn this way, something like this anyway. It looks like a shmoo. But in Japan, you buy these toys that are darumas. And they are so weighted in here that you can never knock them over. You can bat it on the floor, bat it this way, bat it that way, but it always comes up again. And so the poem says, 7 times down, 8 times up, such is life. So this is the principle of not being phased, not being attached. So to play the game, you can't phase me. This is very important in the art of lifemanship. Fundamental gamesmanship. Because you see, when the Zen monks moved into Kyoto, they took over the best part of town. Simply fantastic how this happened. The beautiful hills were occupied.
Okay, I'm gonna read some Aleister Crowley here. I'm gonna create 3-minute shorts on YouTube, so I'm gonna restart all my YouTubes, and so here's the rest of Al.
By the brigands, who later became the Japanese nobility. The great daimyos, these were the toughest characters. And the Zen monks played a game with them, which was that, you know, you possess all these